Welcome. My name is Pam Horan, and I'm the president of the Online Publishers Association. What I'd like to do is begin by having each of the panelists introduce themselves. They'll tell you a little bit about themselves and a little bit about their company, and then obviously we'll move into the session. So I'll start with you.
Great. My name is Chris Jacob. I work for a company called Podshow. We are a network of independently produced media, a lot of podcasts, about 60% audio, about 40% video, 135 different categories, about 40,000 shows in 36 languages. So we're a global network that tries to delight three main groups of people that are not easy to get to communicate or cooperate together. The audience is the most important, the advertisers, who are critical because they monetize the whole model, and of course the programmers. So our team's background is a bunch of folks who've been on the cusp between media and technology for about the last 15 or 20 years. And we're just having a very, very interesting time changing the world of media if we can.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ed Delfs. I'm Vice President of National Sales and Operations at Real Networks. Many of you probably think of Real Networks as a technology company via the Real Player. I work on our consumer entertainment side, which is focused primarily on music. We run RollingStone.com through a partnership with Warner Publications. We have Rhapsody Music Service, which some of you may be familiar with, and Rhapsody.com. An entertainment guide that's housed within the Real Player, and it's in 14 local language markets around the world. And then one of the largest casual gaming companies. And we have a horizontal advertising program that works through all those different platforms, as well as a convergence media program using emerging media in advertising programs for major brand advertisers.
Great.
I'm Keith Richmond, CEO of Break.com. Break is one of the leading entertainment channels for guys 15 to 35. We get about between 850,000 and 1 million unique visitors every day who watch about 10 million movies on a daily basis. I think the two key things about our platform is that, one, we provide a filtered entertainment experience. So we leverage technology and our audience to isolate the best content that's submitted by the audience and created by the audience, and we provide it for them. It's sort of like a traditional media company would provide a programmed entertainment experience. The second thing we do is we compensate the users for the original content that we post. And I think since late 2004, we've given out a significant portion of revenue to the audience on both a per clip and a revenue share basis.
Great.
I'm Bruce May. I'm SVP of Corporate Development for White Blocks. I'm sitting in for Greg, our CEO, in case you were looking at the listing and didn't see my name. White Blocks builds private labeled broadcast networks over the internet for anybody that wants one. We have over 40 interactive features, and we're really all about monetizing your content. So we do pay-per-view subscriptions, interactive ads, and most significant now is interstitial or inserted video commercials.
Great.
Hi, I'm Alex Welch, CEO of Photobucket.com. We are a consumer service that allows users to upload their images, videos, photos. From there, they can link those images and videos to any of the social media or blogging sites they hang out at. We've currently got about 22 million members, growing at an extremely rapid rate as really the penetration of online photos and video continues.
Great. And as I said, my name is Pam Horan, and I'm the president of the Online Publishers Association. For those of you that are not familiar with the OPA, we're a trade association, and we're made up of the leading online content sites like the New York Times, CNN, ESPN. And I just want to bring that context because obviously during the course of the conversation, we're going to talk about what's going on in video advertising. And the role of the OPA is to develop a lot of different research. In June, we released a media consumption study that looked at how do consumers interact with different type of media, and we actually did an observational study where we recorded every 15 seconds what they were doing in terms of the activities that were going on in their life and the different types of media that they were interacting with. So if anyone's interested in that, they can go on our site. But one of the other things that we looked at as well is what's going on in the video space. So in a minute, I'm going to just begin by showing you some of the findings that we had there to kick off our conversation. But since we've all introduced ourselves, what I want to do is get a little bit more of a flavor of who's in the audience, so that as we have our conversation, we can kind of guide it based on who's in the audience. So if I can just have a show of hands, how many of you are considered publishers? Okay. How many of you are advertising agencies? or agencies of some flavor? Okay. How many of you are vendors? Okay. How many of you are technology providers? Okay. How many of you are marketers? So I'm missing out a major category. What am I not capturing? Finance, okay. Distribution. I had a hand in the back. All right. So we've got a range of people in the audience. As we know, the name of this session is called Internet Video Advertising Marketing and the Next Generation of Consumer Reach. In preparation for this panel and talking to this group, as well as kind of looking at what's going on in the marketplace, one of the things that became evident was whether you're a traditional publisher like our members, whether you're an advertising agency, whether you are a marketer, or some of the types of tools and communities that the panelists here are providing solutions for, it's very evident that we're all facing similar problems or similar challenges in terms of leveraging video and figuring out what the business model is. So what we thought we'd do today is focus a little bit on the best practices and talk a little bit about what's going on in terms of what we're seeing with video and video advertising. We thought we'd talk about the business model because there's a lot of discussion as to what should the business model be. You've got people that are coming from the internet side that are talking CPM. You've got people that are coming from the broadcast side that are talking about GRPs. And then the ultimate question is really, or is it ROI? We'll also talk about what needs to happen in terms of the metrics and the measurement of the format, because obviously that's going to be a key piece of it. And ultimately understanding what needs to happen for this to become more and more of a legitimate platform. I can't tell you how many calls I get from the press asking, why is video advertising not taking off? When I consistently hear from my members that they've sold out their inventory. So the question becomes, what really needs to happen for it to really go to the next level? So as I mentioned, one of the things that I thought would be helpful is I thought I would kick off and just give you a snapshot of a study that we conducted and released earlier this year. And what we did was we really looked at what's going on in the internet space in terms of where consumers are going for video. And just to set it up, we did it with Magid Research. And you'll see just in terms of the demographics of who we spoke to, it was the US online population. And it was good split in terms of gender, as well as socioeconomic, as well as the age breakdown. So obviously the predominant was really between that 18 and 49, but we did capture an older profile as well as a younger profile. And our goal was really to understand what type of video are consumers looking for on the web, where are they going for that to get that video, and then ultimately, what is their proclivity for advertising on the web. So to begin with, the good news is that we're seeing that people are obviously taking advantage of video on the web. We found that 5% are actually looking at it daily, 29% total weekly. This study was done earlier this year. We fielded it in the end of January, beginning of February. I think these numbers will have changed dramatically, and we'll continue to benchmark it. But just to give a framework, there's obviously a great understanding that video does exist. And so that's just to kind of frame what's going on. I think another thing that's really interesting, though, is that we're seeing the role of brand continue to play a very important role. We found here that 30% said they always visit the same website to get their video. Another almost 60% said they visit between 2 and 5 websites. So as I said, we're definitely seeing that there's a role and an extension for how people are viewing the web and ultimately getting their video and how brand plays a part. And you can see we actually broke it out into different audiences. For the full copy of this report, you can go on the web, but I just grabbed about 6 slides to put things into context. So then the question becomes, what type of video are they looking for on the web? And so we queried them about what are you looking at daily, weekly, and so on. And you'll see that news and current events was the #1 type of video that they were going to for the web. Now, I think this is a little bit of a chicken and egg, because the reality is it all has to do with what video is really available. And as I said, I think we're going to see this transform dramatically when we start to look at the results of our study next year. So in this case, just so you understand how to read it, 6% said they were looking at news and current events daily. 14% said several times a week. 7% said once a week. And then you can see how it breaks down for the next category being jokes, then music, movies, weather, entertainment, movie reviews, TV shows, advertisements, which was interesting to see come up, sports highlights, and then we see short films, so longer form, and then business and financial. But as I said, I think there's a little bit of a chicken and egg, and that's one of the things that we'll discuss with the panel. Another thing that's interesting is that we actually found that, back to that number about where they're going to find their video, 50% said that they go to a certain website specifically to watch video, and about another 50% said that they were surfing the web and they came upon video that they were watching. But the good news is there's definitely a very large portion of the audience that recognizes the fact that there's video, and the opportunity, I think, is for marketers and publishers and those that are providing content to continue to educate and make them aware of the availability of it. I think what's good news for all of us is that we definitely are finding that it's an application that is motivating people to take action. So in this case, we found that 40% of video viewers have actually clicked on a link within the video. So we're definitely seeing that there's an action that can occur, and it's obviously great for marketers and advertisers. As well as 40% said they actually visited a website. Now, specific to video advertising, we wanted to understand really what was happening and whether there was even an interest in video advertising. And so one of the things that we asked was, have you actually ever watched a video ad? And 66% said that they had. But what's more interesting is the action that has been taken after that. We found that 44% of those 66 that actually had seen a video ad had taken some sort of action. 31% had actually gone to a website, and 8% had actually made a purchase. So the good news is that we definitely find that it is something that is influencing people to do something. Now, is it because it's new? There's not a lot of it. The opportunity is really for us to figure out what are the best practices to take advantage of. Another thing we wanted to understand is really what type of units are going to be most successful. Because as we all know, it's not going to be effective to just take a 30-second spot and bring it over to this platform. You've got to leverage the platform and take advantage of the interactive capabilities. So we wanted to understand what the range of amount of time that they would be interested in actually seeing video ads. And we found that actually, 40% were talking about 30 or more seconds. So there's also an opportunity to look at the role that long form plays. But we also found that there was interest in shorter form, in a 10-second, which maybe drove them to take some other activity. So that just kind of, I wanted to use that to set up the kind of the discussion for today. Just to kind of part on a real up note, this was a stat that eMarketer released back in December. And what you'll see, they're projecting in 2009 for the video advertising market to be a $1.5 billion market. So obviously huge projections in terms of what we can all take advantage of here. Okay? Terrific. So with that, what I want to do is just kick off the conversation. And as I said, we thought we'd frame the conversation with these three topics that I talked about, really looking at some of the best practices, looking at what's going on with the business model, and then ultimately looking at measurement and tools. I also want to open it up to you all. So during the course of the conversation, please feel free to raise your hand, or at some point I will kind of reach out and see if anyone wants to participate in the conversation. Okay, great. So I wanted just to start by getting a reaction to a little bit about what I talked about here, which is really to understand, what type of content do you believe is really lending itself best? As I mentioned, I think there's a little bit of a chicken and egg why we saw the stats that we did, that news was actually the number one. But what do you believe? Do you believe that there is certain content, or really would all content work well in this platform?
Well, I think the fundamental change that we're seeing now is that people are reaching out to this stuff instead of having it fired like some giant fire hose of media towards them in their living rooms. So they're actively actually going out and subscribing to this stuff in most cases, or as you indicated, stumbling onto it or going to a certain site to discover it. So that's a big difference, and context plays a big part in that proposition. What we hear most often from people who are consuming both video and audio advertising on our network is, just make it not suck. Just try to put this stuff in context with the other stuff I'm watching and listening to. Try not to give me, as you suggested, the 30-second spots from radio or television. If you do give me those spots, give me the 12 commercials that GoDaddy couldn't put up on ABC during the Super Bowl because the censors wouldn't approve them. Don't give me the 13th one that they did get approved and launched on the Super Bowl. So it's either velvet rope content that they can't get anyplace else, or stuff that is very pertinent and in context with whatever else they're watching.
Okay, great. Ben?
Yeah, we find the same thing from the user perspective, but from the advertiser perspective, it's actually the opposite, which is they have a lot of this content, a lot of these advertisements that they've spent millions of dollars producing, and they want to repurpose them for the web and get the maximum bang for their buck. So we'll do something like an upfront program with a Pfizer, which is a year-long video advertising program across a suite of 12 different consumer products. Pretty straightforward and boring, but for them it allows them to actually repurpose these ads that they did spend millions of dollars to produce. And they're having trouble reaching their audience on a fragmented TV and cable network. So from the user perspective, they obviously want something that's a little more interesting. But from the advertiser perspective, a lot of times they're confused about the marketplace. There's a lot of new technology out there. There's a lot of our job as a publisher a lot of times is to help demystify the advertising market for an advertising agency or a marketer, a CMO at a major Fortune 500 brand company is trying to make sense of all this and at the same time take advantage of everything he's already produced.
So Ed, just to follow up, so are you finding that there's certain types of advertisers that are leveraging it in a different way, or is it just depend on if they've got a CMO that happens to be innovative and is willing to test the platform?
It's as active as the agency or the advertiser wants to be. The more active they are, in my opinion, the better results they're going to get. We ran a deal with Cadillac once. It was a 5-second ad, and it was 0 to 50 in 5 seconds was the advertisement, and all it showed was a car going 0 to 50 in 5 seconds, and it was awesome. And right now we're experimenting with long format video for the movie studios. So we're running 2.5, 3-minute trailers, but we're integrating them editorially throughout the network, so they're not even viewed as advertisements. As you're going through the movies and film part of our network, you actually are given the opportunity to view a long format trailer. And we get compensated for that. So it's in essence, we're actually selling it on a CPM basis. So it's and everything in between.
Okay, Chris?
We don't actually sell pre-roll video right now at all. It's just the audience and the demographic aren't really watching necessarily 30-second commercials on television, so we don't assume they're going to watch them on our platform before 20-second videos necessarily. What we found though is that we can integrate advertising in a number of different ways, and frequently it's just the audience self-selects to watch the ads. I think over a month-long period, 3 of the 4 top most viewed videos were actually ads that had been supplied to the site. One was for Bubblicious, one was for Keystone Beer, and it was really interesting. They were just creative, well-done ads that targeted our demographic. It wasn't Dove body spray, Dove body soap, but it was stuff that a 15 to 30-year-old male demographic is going to want to watch. And so we certainly find that there are advertisers who don't want to appear next to user-submitted and user-created content, and we ameliorate that by we don't actually put ads next to any content that's just been submitted to the site. Once it's been filtered and checked out and posted to any of the main channels, we put ads next to it. And there really are a lot more advertisers today than 6 months ago that want it to be next to it. And even more so, there are a lot more advertisers who are creating content specifically for the platform, which has been an interesting change, which is how can we create something so interesting or outrageous that it will take on a viral life of its own? And how can we work with the different platforms in order to seed that life faster than it might normally do otherwise?
But you're not seeing any sort of characteristics that you would say this type of advertiser, this type of marketer is willing to engage?
Certainly the people who focus more on digital marketing are much more willing to engage. The digital ad agencies are much more aggressive about contacting us and trying to find ways to get their stuff to work. And it's primarily because they're not the ones creating the 30-second spots in the first place. So they're less tied to the initial advertisements. They're the ones who are more frequently trying to see if they can edit it down to a 5-second spot that they've gotten 2 or 3 days to try to get it to play in different places on the internet. So the digital agencies are much more aggressively trying to figure out how to work with the platforms for obvious reasons.
Pam, to add one
Yeah.
thing, in terms of categories, it's the category of advertisers that have the most highly produced ads that are the early adopters on the web. So studios with the trailers, the auto industry in particular, they've spent a lot of money on highly produced ads. And information-rich video ads are a little bit tougher. There's a lot of information on a small screen, a little tougher to get across. So we found on our side that it's those major categories with the highly produced ads that are the early adopters.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what's held back the industry more than anything is the inability to do interstitial or inserted video commercials. The reason why there's so much short form is because people can't afford to do long form. And it's simply, we've been waiting for the business models to make that a success. I think the models are going to be the old models. I think the television model works well. If you only have short-form video and you put a 30-second spot in front of a 1-minute piece of video, you're taking up 25% of my viewing time with a video commercial. I mean, that's like putting a 15-minute commercial in front of every hour of television. So there's been a lot of pushback from the consumers for that reason. We now are doing inserted video commercials, so I'm connecting the dots between the content creators and the agencies. And the agencies are all over this. They're ready to go. It's a chicken and egg problem, but the solution is simply to connect those dots. We broadcast the Indy 500 this year, and that's a significant amount of inventory. In fact, we're working on all their races. So we're now in a position to sort of hold the hand of the people that can bring the content to the table and go to the agencies and say, okay, you can use your traditional television model. Everybody knows what the CPM is. Plug it in. We're good to go. But the good news is that, oh, by the way, guys, there's interactivity here, which enhances the CPM. So it's going to be a richer environment. It's going to be much better in a lot of ways, and the agencies are embracing this. As I said, I was in New York. I've been in New York. I've lost count how many times I've been in New York this year, but I've been up there talking to a lot of the major agencies. And they embraced me with open arms when I walked in the door, and they're saying, well, tell us how this is going to work. What are we going to do? They know it's coming. They see it's coming. Our challenge at White Blocks has been to really sort of teach the agencies how to create interactive commercials. They just don't know how to do it here. We've been doing it with interactive banner commercials integrated into the players that we create. And the battle there has been trying to teach them not to click through. We don't want click-throughs, we want click-ins. And I think one of the biggest lessons here from the internet side is to realize and recognize that we're not bringing surfers to this party. We're bringing media watchers, and media watchers come in to watch an event. They don't come there to watch the Indy 500 and click through to your website. And we don't want to lose them, and Indy doesn't want to lose them. So what I want to do is talk to the agencies and say, create micro experiences, create interactive commercials where you take advantage of the opportunity to communicate directly with the viewer, but on a short time frame, and let them stay in the media experience and move on. So those are the challenges that we are dealing with right now, and it's all just a question of learning curve.
Sure. Alex?
So at PhotoBucket, when we looked at video, we kind of looked back at images and said we built a successful business on really allowing people to upload and link images. We looked at video, looked at the compression technology, and at the end of the day, our users are about their experience on PhotoBucket. We chose early on not to throw big watermarks on people's images, even though we could have got some viral spread from it. That would have been great, but it really injects into the user experience. When we look at the average video on PhotoBucket, it is less than 1 minute. It's a girl singing karaoke. It's a guy falling off his skateboard. For us to insert any type of advertisements within that already short video just doesn't make sense to our users. So we're looking at the other unique opportunities around video. In general, there's between 30 seconds and 5 minutes of upload time where you have undivided attention while somebody's managing or uploading their video. Why aren't we doing more around that? You've got people watching these short videos. Back to what Keith mentioned, there's plenty of inventory and opportunity around the videos. Really, for us, we're not looking exactly at what the exact solution within the video is. I think there's many other opportunities around the management and overall, video process besides just the video itself.
I think just to jump back to what Pam said before, why you'll talk to advertisers who say they want to buy and publishers who say there's no inventory is because the people who are running the pre-rolls don't have as much inventory by orders of magnitude as the people who refuse to run the pre-rolls. And yeah, it's a painful decision every month to make materially less money than you could be making by putting an ad in, but that's why we grow every month, and the people who are inserting pre-rolls don't. I think you can just look at the fact that Comedy Central has all these clips of Stephen Colbert up there, but people don't go to Comedy Central to watch the clips of Stephen Colbert. And this will continue, at least in the short term, I think, where our inventory will continue to increase, but that's just because we're not interfering and we're not putting the ads up.
Well, and I think that's it's interesting because one of the things that I actually hear from advertising agencies is, I don't mind pre-roll, don't give me post-roll. Because who's going to have watched a video and then stay around for an ad? So I mean, one of the things that I've been talking to a lot of agencies about is thinking about new formats. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I'm hearing more and more, you know what, the pre-roll's okay, so, you know, even though you may not think so, but it's more looking at how do we become part of the storyline? How do we connect in a different way? So I don't know if there's any examples that you would refer to, whether it's stuff that's going on your site or whether it's stuff you've just seen in the marketplace, that you think is actually doing this well and is thinking about it in a different way. Because I think that, you know, as you said, Keith, you know, it's going through a transition. The natural thing is take a 30-second spot that we've already produced. It doesn't cost a lot of money to put that on. But now the opportunity is for us to be thinking about the platform in a different way. So with that, you know, I don't know if you want to start, Alex, if there's something you want to add in terms of what you're seeing.
Well, again, for us, you know, it's not about interfering with the user content. It's about finding all the unique ad placements. You know, when you go to an advertiser, they always want something different. They don't want the same as everybody else has. So it's looking at your unique business model and finding the time in which you have, you know, undivided attention from a user, when you really have, you know, some piece of time that they're willing to do something or perform some action. So, you know, we chose not to do the pre or the post roll, and I think that, you know, we continue to look at other places within the activity itself to monetize.
Okay, Keith?
I think what we're planning for, which is, you know, what we're finding is users are coming and they're watching not just one video, but they're watching 10 videos. And over time, I can clearly see how that's going to migrate into us providing playlists or users creating playlists. And if you're sitting there on the site and you're watching 15 videos anyway, the opportunity to start inserting ads in that process becomes a little more flexible. And, you know, already we see that users are favoriting videos, they're coming back, they're watching the same videos, and they're just watching again and again and again as many videos as you put in front of them. So over time, two things are going to happen. One, the videos that they watch will get longer. So even it's going to go from 25 seconds to 2 minutes, and that creates advertising opportunities before, during, and after. And then, you know, you'll be able to take short form clips and just add them together and put advertisements in there as well. And you can make them highly targeted. At least on Break, you can make them highly targeted to the demographic. We don't, you know, clearly if you look at the site, there's not going to be a huge audience of women, and I think it's 90% guys and 90% between the ages of 15 and 35. So that presents a very cable-like ad model where you know who your audience is and you're just trying to put the contextual ad in front of them.
So in terms of talking about the contextual ad, will you actually be able to track what were those 10 ads they looked at and they all had a similar theme and therefore this ad would be most appropriate? Do you feel that it will ultimately get to that point?
Yeah, I think all the ad publishers are doing a very good job, and a lot of the ad networks as well, in creating technologies that we can just leverage. I don't see us building it, but and I think right now, if you use DoubleClick, you can tell when people clicked off the video or off the ad itself. And so it's just a matter of leveraging that. And post-roll might work. You know, if you can track how many people watch the video, in a world of 1 billion video views a month, you know, if a small percent of them watch the whole thing, you're still going to do pretty well.
Good.
Yeah, we have a little bit different of an experience at Reel, because we actually have one of the platforms people use to consume video, which is the Reel Player. So there's about 36 million people a month who open a Reel Player to consume video. So it's contextually relevant before their video loads to have a pre-roll. And for us, they're actually the highest performing ads on our network. And in terms of the length of format, it's key. So you're asking for people's time in exchange for something. So the higher quality experience you give them and the length of the experience that you give them is critical. On you know, a lot of the user-generated content where there's a 10-second clip, it's not worth it to run a pre-roll. If you're running a 4.5-minute music video, or if you're running a news clip, or if you're running any other type of long-format video that people are opening the Reel Player to watch, it's perfectly acceptable to have a 15 or even a 30-second pre-roll ahead of time. And while their content's running, we then put contextually relevant HTML ads during the entire experience, and the performance and click-through rates on those are the highest across our network. But there's some new technologies as well that are kind of taking it a step further. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Ultramercial. It's the Salon.com model. I don't know if it's, oh yeah, you have some slides up there, I believe. It's actually having users opt in to view a long format video commercial or a series of flash screens in exchange for access to premium content, premium products, something that they wouldn't otherwise get or that they'd have to pay for. Salon.com does a day pass. I was at TheStreet.com prior to Reel, and we had access to a premium subscription site called Real Money. And at Reel Networks, we have a subscription music service called Rhapsody, and then we have a casual game service called Reel Arcade. And if you opt in, it says sponsored by. We're currently running them a lot of major auto companies. Honda is running them across our gaming and our music network right now. So if you click and you watch the full 60-second Honda commercial, so it's a 60-second full-form commercial, you get a 14-day free trial to Rhapsody in this case, and on our gaming network you get a full-form game that would cost you $20 as a regular consumer, which from our...
So basically you're incentivizing.
Yeah, it's
the consumer.
incentive-based. It's incentive-based, and it's a win for everybody because the users actually opted into it. They've chosen to watch the commercial in exchange for access to premium products or services or content. There's a great reporting structure that the company puts in place, Ultramercial, that lets the brand advertiser know in the end how it did in terms of what percentage of people actually started the commercial, how many completed it, how many clicked through to the sponsor site, and then how many actually clicked through to get their premium service. And it's great for us because the premium that we charge for this is staggering compared to, I mean, you charge a high premium just for normal pre-roll advertising and video advertising, but the premium for this is literally can be 10x. So it's for us, these are kind of things that we're looking at.
Okay.
Well, to continue our auto-related pattern here, I sat yesterday with the Chief Information Officer of General Motors, and I can tell you with perfect clarity that he is not worried about what he paid for his last Cadillac commercial. What he is worried about is that his brand is damaged and he's hemorrhaging customers right, left, and center. He's concerned about the fact that he can't convert his customers into an audience by communicating with them using mainstream media. And I think, not to disagree with my colleague here, but regurgitating 30-second commercials and stretching them out over longer periods of time is probably not the way to do that effectively. My guess is the way to do it, and the way we've seen it done by companies like Acura and others on our network, is actually making the programming interesting. So we just ran a campaign with Acura that focused around providing people additional information about the features of the car, but it was from Grammy Award-winning artists who actually designed the sound system. So for people who were interested in that stuff, it was very entertaining content, whether or not they were thinking about buying that car anyway, and it's being incredibly well received. So again, back to the very simple concept of it would be really great if we focused on the audience for a change instead of on the agencies that are buying and planning this stuff. I love them. They fund our business every single day. I think they're great, creative, inspired people in the buying and planning agencies, but they're not the customer. The audience is the customer, and the clients who pay them to plan their media are the customer. So I think the closer we get to those people, the better off we are as an industry.
Okay, great. Bruce, was there anything you wanted to add? I mean, I know that you're coming at it from a little different perspective, and so it's helpful to understand, because obviously, you know, if you look at the confluence between the TV and the web, you know, are you seeing, and you did give the example of what was happening with the Indy 500, are there certain things that you're finding in terms of different types of format that is working?
Well, I think there's less conflict there than, I don't think 30 seconds dead, but clearly in the internet it's not going to rule. There's short form, long forms, and more importantly, more creative forms like what we were just listening to. And again, I want to emphasize the potential of interactivity to make it a much more interesting world. The interactivity for the advertiser gives the advertiser ability to communicate with the viewer directly. And that's prospects, not just customers. And that's a dramatic revolution for them. I used to write television commercials locally in Houston. I did marketing videos, I did a lot of this stuff. And it's just kind of mind-boggling when you think about what we're talking about. And essentially we're saying to the advertiser, we're giving you a way to communicate with the viewer in such a way that you can pull them into the sales process. And you've got to understand, in their world, it's all about the sales process. It's not necessarily about the sale or closing the sale or making an e-commerce sale. But a qualified lead is huge. And I think some of you may have noticed that Google's now talking about charging on the basis of qualified leads. But the advertiser now has that power in their hands. And if they use it wisely, they're going to start to learn how that they can develop ROIs that are really meaningful. We sometimes think that we're pushing the entire advertising agency in a direct marketing world, a direct marketing universe, but really we're not. It's much richer than that, and it's more about saying, well, we can stop focusing on preaching about brand values, brand awareness, because that's all we could prove, and that's all we could really bring to the table. And now we can start talking about doing ROIs calculated on things like the customer acquisition costs. And also now drilling down into it industry by industry. So if you're IBM selling mainframe computers and you can target effectively an audience that has a high level of CEOs, that's a lot different in terms of the value of that customer, obviously, than if you're selling potato chips. So there are a lot of other factors here in play. And it's hard to talk about any part of this without talking about all the pieces. There are a lot of moving pieces here. But a lot of it, again, comes back now, not just the interactivity, but also the targeting the audience effectively, and recognizing, too, that all of these things are moving forward together. It's that chicken and eggs, and maybe it's a whole farm full of chicken and eggs.
Okay, great. That's a good segue into what's going on and how you view measurement, because I think that's an area that we're hearing both from the publishers and from the advertising community in terms of, is it streamed, is it started, is it, what exactly are you looking at in terms of, either the partners you're working with today or the technology that you're providing? How are you viewing building in the metrics? What type of metrics are you offering? And what do you believe should really be the standards, at a minimum, that the industry should look at? Ed, you should have smiled at me.
So for us, the actual video advertising piece of a deal is usually just one line item. Most of the programs that we create for major brand advertisers are what we're calling convergence media. So it can include the custom website development, blogs, podcasts, video advertising, HTML advertising. We're using a lot of music-related technology for mashups. I just did a program for Ford where it was a battle of the bands. And if you're an up-and-coming band, you can upload your MP3 onto this, and then we have the editors of Rolling Stone vote on the winners, and we fly them out and we film a live rock and roll show with the winners, and then we put it online and we stream ads in front of it. So in terms of performance of that, there's a lot of different ways. They're evaluating the quality of our creative. My operations team actually runs as an in-house creative agency, and we produce all that internally. And then you're going to have your standard measurement philosophies when you're looking at the DART reports and seeing people actually clicking through or not. Some advertisers care about that, some don't. If it's we're talking about the auto industry. The auto industry is less sensitive to click-through rates. They are more sensitive to being next to really cool, really hip, up-and-coming content. That's why I'm actually in agreement with you, because we're doing a lot of things for Hyundai, for example. We built an entire music platform where we have road trip radio stations sponsored by Hyundai that you can download onto your device and take with you when you're on the road, things like that. So in terms of measurement, they look across the entire program that we've developed for them. We are gauged on sort of click-through performance for certain advertisers, and that's more sort of on the consumer electronic side, or if it's if it's a company that cares more about direct response. More and more things are leaning towards custom creative, custom sponsorship programs, and then they want brand awareness. They want, obviously, a number of eyeballs that actually saw the program that we put together for them. How widely it was distributed, how well it was produced. So we get gauged both as a creative agency and then as a marketing platform. So it's a little more complex than just sort of standard advertising programs, which we do as well. And we run plenty of straight standard advertising programs that are looked at. They look at the DART reports and see what the click-through and conversion rates were. But it's really leaning more towards these major integrated programs.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear that they're wanting to be measured on brand. Because for so long, obviously, the industry was talking about CPC or the clicks and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting because we get advertisers who put up videos, and they're impressed by what we're not necessarily impressed by, which is it's been seen 80,000 times or 250,000 times, and I think part of it's because it's such a different medium for them, which is they're impressed that 250,000 people actually opted in to watch their commercial, because we don't force anyone to watch it. So in a lot of ways, it is a pretty impressive number. What we like to see, and we try to sort of track for people, is how many times videos have been passed around, because that's one of the natures of how viral is something really. And it's you put up a movie trailer, and sometimes 50,000 people will enter the site through the movie trailer, which means that 50,000 people essentially emailed that to a friend and asked them and recommended it. And so it's almost not only how many people are interacting with this, but how many people are recommending this piece of content and this product to somebody else. And increasingly, we're finding that number of times this video has been blogged, number of times this video has been shared, number of times this video has been seen twice. These are all great indications of not only how many people have seen the video, but also how many people are engaged with a piece of content. And it really is A, I'm opting in to watch a video if it's on the system. B, I'm sharing it with my friends. C, I'm watching it again. And D, I'm then putting it on my MySpace page. Or I'm jacking it from the site and I'm putting it on PhotoBucket and hosting it in 50 different places. And it's interesting to track how many people are not just interfacing with a commercial, but actually interfacing with the product itself and the brand.
Okay, Bruce.
Well, that's really fascinating. That's an interesting answer. And it just instantly I was flashed on, this is a side issue, but it's an important issue. It has to do with intellectual property and how you control your content. So that's the issue for the content producers. But what's happening is that those rules are changing. So advertisers are going to have to kind of understand that new rule as well. We're seeing this content move around, and we're developing new ways, new mechanisms to provide digital rights management and other tools that allow people to have access. But when that content moves around, then those are just fascinating statistics, that advertisers have never thought of before. A little frightening for the content producers, but I agree with all of that. I think that those are wonderful things to measure as well. But I have to come back again to the metrics that I think are most important. Are what does that mean to the advertiser's business model? What does it mean to him? If you just want to say, well, you increase brand awareness, great. I know how to preach that all day long, but still the CEO's going, where's the money? And the accountability is there now. The ability to create accountability is there, and that's good news if you come to the table and create the mechanisms that deliver that. So I think those metrics are going to be significantly more important as we move forward. And again, any measurement that has anything to do with moving a viewer into the sales process, and even on a shallower level, any metric that has a connection to delivering information to the advertiser about the viewers that makes sense in terms of their business models, and that's a rich territory.
So we don't feel that there's some baseline metrics, because I think that, Chris, as you had talked about, the viral piece of it is really interesting, and kind of looking at the viral metric. Do we feel that there's any specific baseline, or is it really these multitude of things? It really depends on the agency. It depends on the marketer. It's back to what you were saying, Chris, which is it's about the customer. Let's think about that.
Well, I think for the agencies, there's a broad river between what they will accept and what they would like. We focus on essentially, I'm going to be drunk with my own conviction here and wander again towards the audience, but we try to make life easier for the audience and at the same time give the advertisers what they want, whether it's the client or the agency. And we do that in a couple of different ways. One, we register the audience members, so we have demographic information about those folks. Two, we built in conjunction with Limelight Networks, essentially a private delivery network that allows us to host for free and deliver on a guaranteed basis the shows that are on our network, which allows us to track every single download. So that's a measure of performance. And we've made it much more simple for the audience to actually click once and subscribe to a show, which means A, it's easier for them, and B, we now have subscription information. So my guess is, to answer your original question, that some combination of those three elements will allow us to triangulate some measure of the relationship between the audience and the host. And that's what's valuable in this whole equation. The local DJ who talked passionately about the song that they loved, that no longer happens because we're playing it all out of a cart system nationwide, and one could drive from Los Angeles to New York and hear the same 12 songs the entire way across. Or the network news anchor who no longer has a huge amount of credibility talking to the entire nation about the day's events. These relationships are, in my opinion, fundamentally broken. And in 5 years, half of the stuff we consume as media consumers won't be produced by major media companies. It'll be produced by other consumers. And if there's a relationship between those hosts who are passionate about the issues that we're talking about every day across our dinner tables, then we've got to have some way to measure it. And my guess is some combination of the subscription event, the demographics, and the raw download and performance numbers.
So I think that kind of leads into, looking at how you're building your communities. And I mean, each of you have kind of a different connection point, and you're building different types of audiences. But what are you doing to really encourage your community? And it can be from the most basic, you're generating, awareness so that they're visiting your site. In the case of what Keith and Alex are doing, curious to understand, really what are you doing to either provide them with tools or basically encourage them to be part of your community, so that whether it converts into an advertising business opportunity or another business model, what are some of the things that you're doing to leverage this quote-unquote user-generated world to encourage them to be part of your community?
Well, for us, I think the biggest challenge was just purely awareness. Before we launched video, we surveyed our users, and I think something like 80% of them said, yes, if you offered video, I would use it. Well, a lot of times you get these high-level answers, but you really don't dig deep enough into them to understand what they really mean. And so we launched video. We go out and survey users, and something like 60 to 70% of them say, "Oh, I didn't know you offered video." And so there's this basic, for us it was a basic awareness problem of, for one, PhotoBucket is a name and a brand, and it's somewhat limiting, and we can't change that. But it's really about getting users to understand that they can create and host different types of content. So once you get past the overall awareness, you've got to get them past kind of this idea that it's scary. We went out and asked, and that was the number one word that kept coming back was, video is scary, and they meant scary not to watch, but scary to upload. It was a challenge. It was hard. It took a long time. So I think looking at technology, looking at compression technologies, really giving them tools that allow them to upload content, convert it much easier, much faster for them, gets them more engaged. Users are really about instant feedback. Once they upload something and know it's there immediately available for them to put on their blog or their MySpace account, there's gratification there, and now that it's ingrained, that they will come back and they will do that again.
Okay, so it's primarily the tools.
Exactly.
Okay, Keith?
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. The interesting thing about user-created content is most users aren't creating the content, and most of it's not very, very good. So most people are still viewers, and a lot of what we do is try to make it easier for viewers to watch more videos and find videos they like, and that plays to our strength because we know if someone's watched X clip, they're going to be most interested in watching Y clip more often than not, and it allows us to introduce them to new stuff. The challenge that we face is actually exactly like Alex's, which is people put you as a certain kind of site. So they come to our site to watch videos and to upload videos, and we introduce functionality all the time that nobody notices. And so it's a lot of times it's just a user education. And how do you get people to notice the other part of the page that talks about the 25 things you've just built? A lot of times they don't. And so it's really creating an awareness among the community of what the technology and what the technology platform can do is the most difficult thing. But the biggest opportunity, I think, to keep people involved is find them content that they're really interested in, and make sure that after they're done watching a video, there's another video right afterwards that they want to watch, so they stick around.
Okay.
Yeah, we sort of play on the other end of the spectrum. We're interested in user-generated content, as is everybody, because it's an amazing social phenomenon. But for us, we lean more towards, and maybe it's still a niche philosophy, towards highly produced content. So we go to the other end and we take a look from the brand marketer's perspective. What would they like to be associated with? Per what we were talking about earlier. So we actually produce a lot of the content ourselves, mostly in conjunction with Rolling Stone. So we'll take bands. We have a program that we call Rolling Stone Originals. Actually, I don't know if you have a slide of it or not. But we take bands and we fly them to a studio that we have either in New York or Seattle, and we produce live events. And those are then sponsored. So I think this is an example here of where State Farm was sponsoring the Rolling Stone Original that we shot with a band called the Wreckers. So there was some contextual relevance between Wreckers and State Farm Insurance. But what we did is we took the risk out of the brand marketers' hands. They didn't have to worry about the content. On a lot of the UGC sites, I mean, we're concerned with rights issues. Running Rhapsody Music Service, we have a large legal team that deals with rights, and I think that's going to come to play at some point. There's a quality issue, and if you boil down content, there is some quality content in there, but it's user-generated content, and most users don't have talent to produce content, and that's why the studios are in business, and that's why bands like the Wreckers are platinum selling albums. Or selling platinum albums, but there's a lot of quality content out there. But I just think that the challenge for people who run sites, UGC sites, is going to be corralling that. We receive a lot of RFPs from major brand advertisers that say no UGC content allowed. And because they say if you can't control that content, one bad association with something that's risky, and they've spent $100 million building a major brand, that could get shot down very quickly on the web. Because it is viral. So you're associated with something that may not necessarily be what you want to be associated with, and then it gets spread like wildfire throughout the web. And there's a couple examples, which I'm not going to share because they're off color, but major brands have had some, major people have lost their jobs over, associating themselves with content that went the wrong way. So everybody's, the major brand advertisers, at least who we work with, are tentative right now. They're interested. You can't deny the volume, and you can't deny the interest. What you can deny right now is, or at least question, is the quality. And we sort of lean towards the other end, where we're trying to produce high quality content for our advertisers to be associated with. And then I'm sure at some point we're going to dip into the UGC side as well, but today we haven't really done it.
Okay. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Sure. I would say that it depends on the user-generated content. We have individual shows that are doing more traffic on a download request basis on a monthly basis than CNN's entire podcasting lineup. So the argument that professionally produced content wins every time, I'm going to respectfully disagree with. But the rights issue is an issue. We created an entire network of music for people to use in their podcasts because we knew that if we didn't, people would get sued, and that's a problem. We also spent a lot of time working on tools like Cast Blaster and others. We think, audio and photos, lucky for you on the end, are transition drugs, right? They will lead people to do other things. Audio production is reasonably easy. We now have dozens and dozens of easy production tools thanks to all this user-generated programming that's out there. Video is still a little bit harder, but it will get easier over time. And I think there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of frustrated producers of programming out there who are every bit as interesting to the other individuals in their circle of friends as, Lost. The conversation that happens around Lost as a television program is much, much more interesting to me as the audience has it than the program itself. If the program wasn't there, the conversation wouldn't happen, but I still think that there's plenty of good quality content out there, great programming, both audio and video, and the advertisers agree.
So are you not seeing what Ed's seeing in terms of advertisers saying that they do not want to be involved with user-generated content, that,
I think they don't want to be involved with user-generated programming on networks that are uncontrolled. If you are programming a network, like networks should be programmed, and you are carefully managing and you either have an exclusive relationship as we do or own outright, which we don't, the programming that exists on your network in which you place advertising, then it's not as big of a challenge for advertisers because there is some level of stability and structure and there is a circle of approval. We ran a user-generated advertising campaign for Earthlink over the last 24 weeks, and they did what a lot of people did, which was repurposed a radio ad. And it didn't work very well. Surprise, surprise. And the answer that we got back from the audience was, we love Earthlink. We think they're great. We think their service is great. The problem is, we don't like their ads. And if you think about it for a second, this is the way we would present it. So we took that back to both the agency, MediaVest in New York, and the client in Atlanta and said, this is a golden opportunity. And they agreed. And they said, okay, for 12 weeks we'll run an acquisition campaign, getting the audience, we'll put our money where their mouth is. We'll get them to actually produce spots, endorsements, and jingles. And we got thousands of them. And some of them were horrible. And some of them were really good. And they're actually running 10 weeks of winners, 3 a week, spot, jingle, and endorsement. And then for the last 2 weeks, they're going to announce the grand prize winners, and those folks will be used in a national advertising campaign by Earthlink. So it, as always, depends on the advertiser and depends on the audience, and it certainly depends on the programming and how it's managed. So you can't, it's difficult to run an unmetered network and not think about the advertisers from the very inception of your business, and then later on add that to the mixture. Because, as we've heard here today, then you worry about killing the goose that laid the golden egg, and that's a challenge that a lot of people have.
Let's talk a little bit about the business model, and then what I'd like to do is open it up so people want to be thinking about if they've got questions. But as I think I mentioned, I've had a lot of conversation with agency people, depending on whether they come from the internet space or they come from the broadcast space. Their point of view in terms of what is really the business model that should be applied, whether it's a straight CPM, whether it's or as I said before, whether we should be thinking about it in terms of GRPs. What do you believe the business model is? I mean, there's something, what are we doing today versus where do we think the standard should really sit? Because there's a lot of squishiness still. So, Keith, you want to start?
Yeah, that's tricky. The answer is I don't know. I mean, we've done 10 different deals and they all 10 different pricing mechanisms on all the deals. And I mean, we'd love to be paid only on a CPM basis, but I think things do definitely. At the end of the day, you're trying to help someone get a sale. You can't. Nobody spends money without the hope of building their brand, building their product, or doing something that leads to a sale. And so, we do a mix of CPM, we do a mix of CPA, and we're trying increasingly to do combinations of both, and do specialized campaigns like what Ed was discussing, where you're getting paid for a little bit of everything. I don't see a real standard developing in the short term, if only because I think that real premium pricing does come from creativity, and you can't put a standard on the creativity. So we'll do very different campaigns for people, and they'll pay us magnificently more than if we just ran their banners. And so therefore we're highly incented to do interesting things with them. And I don't know a way we can make that standard ever.
Bruce?
Yeah, we're actually experimenting with that quite a lot. In our case, we have another variable that we're playing with quite a bit, which is just viewer minutes. So it's time in the player time, and we've combined that with impressions. And of course, we're looking at the value of interactivity. We want to monetize that. We want to look at possibly monetizing the value of the basic viewer data correlated with any special data that the advertiser collects directly. So there's obviously a lot of variables here. I think that even I have to say on the viewer minutes, as far as that goes, that's essentially a television model, but it's ultimately still an impression model. It's just we're not quite to the point. The television industry has these wonderful track records, so they can, when you buy a commercial, you're thinking in CPMs, but you're really talking impressions, and even though it's time and space in the player. So at the end of the day, ultimately, it is how many people are you reaching. But then the added value is what this interactive medium can bring to the table. So we need to monetize that as well. And we've got. We're experimenting with different applications. I think we're going to have to be industry specific here. And again, it's my potato chips versus computer chip analogy, is that because we're targeting communities now and we're getting better and better at that, that's going to become more important. And one of the things that have been left out of all the seminars I've gone to today was in talking about premium content and user-generated content. Nobody's talking about the middle of this pyramid, and it's in my pipeline. It's going to be thousands of media companies that are producing content that's highly targeted to the community. Just take golf, for example. There's all these interests, and there's going to be thousands of them. And if you have a magazine that's in the golf industry, you're a candidate to have a new media business model, and it's going to be highly targeted. And the CPMs need to be highly targeted for the same reason. So we need to adjust for all of that as we move forward. But I think those models are getting settled pretty quick this year because we're making those connections I talked about earlier between the content and the advertisers. So there hasn't been out there the kind of content and the number of viewers to really get the agencies involved in a big way. That's changing this year. So I think we're going to see some sort of standardization before the year is out.
And I'm going to segue for a second, and then we'll come back, because Alex, I want to also hear from you. But Are you finding that you're, Bruce, specific to what you're doing, is it coming more from an interactive agency or is it coming more from a traditional broadcast agency?
Well, that is absolutely the challenge. I often say when I talk to people, you often hear that this whole business is about the convergence of technologies, and it's about the convergence of these two industries. And you see the challenges that creates when you're trying to talk across from both communities. They bring their different views and their different ways of doing business. So that's part of the reason why we're trying to be creative in the pricing model so that we can talk to the broadcast industry, talk to the interactive industry, and kind of merge into a hybrid models here that everybody can kind of understand and go, okay, this starting to make sense.
Okay. Alex, what about in terms of monetizing your audience? What are you seeing?
So really with us, we kind of went against throwing a bunch of engineers at trying to solve the problem of with technology or with the data you have, how do you monetize the users? I think there's a lot of great companies out there figuring it out. We're much more focused right now on user experience, user acquisition, really getting users involved with video like they are with photos. And over time, there's no doubt that there will be better ways to monetize the users. I think knowing as much around the user behavior as you can, really creating a sticky service, you're going to get better and better at monetizing. But I'll be the last to say that we're spending a lot of time worrying about exactly how to monetize video today. Particularly, we monetize video the same way as we do images and photos, and the business supports itself on that. So we're kind of actually stepping back and letting it really kind of figure itself out, and then we'll start adopting the best methodologies.
Chris?
Well, I do, as everybody suggested, there is a spectrum. We have advertisers like Shearing Plow who want pet owners, right? They say to us things like, and this came out of the radio group at Zenith, we're not interested in 3 million undifferentiated radio listeners in the local market. We could care less. What we want is tens of thousands of pet owners, and we want to talk directly to those folks in context about Home Again microchips for pet recovery. It's LoJack for dogs. So there are people on that end of the spectrum, and they pay very, very well. And there are other people like Johnson & Johnson who have products like contact lenses for everybody, but their current target is 13 to 17-year-old females, and they want to talk to 13 to 17-year-old females. And for those folks, they want to create a fully formed program that attracts that audience with 2 15-year-old hosts, so they want to build an audience over a 12-month period to have that conversation in context about appearance and contact lenses and so on. So we sold a lot of advertising over the last 18 months, and we have never sold a single unit of it on a CPM basis. So I do think there's a continuum of what people want from either focused or broad demo standpoints. I don't think CPM is the right one. I don't think GRP is the right one. I think we'll come up with a metric that measures this relationship between the host and the audience that's developing, at least in the independent media world. And as far as the generalized media
Will
world,
the advertiser buy that? Will the agency?
they're buying it right now.
Okay, all right.
They may not buy it forever, but my hope is that the buyers, the planners, the clients, the third parties who verify this stuff, and the networks that put this programming out there and make it structured will work together over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. I don't think it'll be by the end of the year, but over the next 12 to 18 months to try and figure out exactly what that metric is and staple it down to the floor. But you have to have all the pieces of information in place to do that. I think, we just launched PodShow Plus, the site that allows us to get the registered audience members and the subscription data 4 weeks ago. So we're still a little bit early on. There's a business there because we're doing it every day, but the metrics I don't think are going to precede the audience development. They will come after it.
Okay. All right, I'd like to take the remaining time and see if there's any questions from the audience. Yes?
I'm Robert Stevens, Commercial Finance. This is a question really maybe for Chris or Bruce. Is it fair to say that advertisers want a relationship with a brand, and that relationship will evolve, maybe a 30-second slot, maybe some interactive advertising, maybe some social network, game placement? Is that fair to say that they want a whole suite of services, or is it binary?
I think they're going to want pretty much what they're used to. The agencies represent a lot of brands, so they're coming to the party simply extending what they're already doing across a lot of media into this area. So everything that they do already, they're just going to extend into this area.
Did anyone else want to add anything?
I would just add that agency people are very, very confused right now. There is a lot. 5 years ago it was confusing when you were just trying to buy online. Now you throw in podcasts and you throw in mashups and you throw in user-generated content and you throw in long format, short format video. You throw in integration with print. You throw in radio. You throw in broadcast, and it's very confusing. Now, old media people are more than confused. They're losing their minds. But even new media agencies are still trying to figure it out. And I think part of our job is really to demystify it for them and take some of that off their plate, because it's confusing for us. I don't know about you guys, but
Right, absolutely.
it's confusing for us as the providers of a lot of this. As a media buyer who's sitting in the office looking at the 13th proposal that week that has 15 different technology line items on it, it's mind-boggling. So simplification is good.
And I'm hearing from the large advertisers this idea of total communications planning. So it definitely is something that they're looking for. It's one of the many pieces that Ed mentioned, but that's becoming more and more paramount. I think, again, it depends on the size of the advertiser and the agency that's supporting it. But I'm hearing more and more about the multi-platform future, the fact that it's not just the different types of platforms in terms of looking at print versus online, but it's also looking at mobile. And it's looking at also, is it editorial driven or user generated? So the platform goes across all this stuff. Yes.
Maybe it's still too early, but is there anybody working on standards for these things? So there's some common communication way to talk between industries and all that?
Well, the IAB, which is another Internet Advertising Bureau, is another online association. And they have been working on video standards. And they actually have posted up, and I don't know how many of you are part of the IAB, but they do have a broadband initiative that has started to set some guidelines. And it's a beginning to really look at the industry. So if you go to their website, the IAB's website, you'll see that they have their standards up there.
Part of the challenge.
Yeah, although I have to add that there's very few people or advertisers have really gone down the road of learning how to leverage the interactive capabilities yet. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned yet, and a lot of standards to be written that nobody even has a clue about where that's going to be.
I was just going to add that as soon as the standards are set, all the advertisers want to do is break them anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because then they don't want to be standard, they want something different. So.
And I think we can all agree that, the last time we set a real standard in broadcast media, it was mandated by the federal government. And what we ended up with was an entire 400 million person cable marketplace extrapolated from 400 Nielsen books and Arbitron ratings. So they're great, they're what we have, they're the standard, but I'd rather have it based on real data at the end of the day.
Okay. Yes.
There seems like there's Scott Jacobs, there seems like there's an incredible amount of energy being used in the presentation of a 60-year-old business model called advertising supported television, etc. Even when maybe it doesn't fit in new technologies and new paradigms, is there no way that we can cut over in the long term the consumption of our entertainment to a user-supported, user-paid-for model, either short form and long form?
I think that the old models will work. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of long form content on the internet. Everybody's, as we said at the beginning, there was a lot of short form because people weren't effectively monetizing it. But I think it'll definitely work. And the nice thing about it is it's an easy pitch. If you go out and say, hey, we're doing long form programming on the internet, and you're going to buy television commercials the same way you've always been buying them, that gets over all the educational hurdles. You can almost sell it that way and then come back and say, well, by the way, there's a lot of added value here. Let me start teaching you about what that is and how that works. But let me get you into the game just by what you're used to. Don't worry about it. It's just standard CPMs, standard television, long formats with inserted video commercials.
I mean, not that this is any relevance to what we're doing necessarily, but I think you see improvements on both ends of the spectrum, which is at some point Google will probably do a great job of helping people monetize content, as will others, in terms of making things be ad supported. And at the other end of the spectrum, small percentages of people will be willing to pay for things on the long tail. But as you get a bigger and bigger audience, you have less and less people who are willing to pay. So it makes sense to explore the advertising models.
Okay. Yes, in the back.
I work for Sony. We look at a lot of small companies. And when you start looking at these companies, they have great technology. They're all out there developing their sites. And when you ask them, well, what's your business? It all goes back, we're going to be ad supported. Is there really that much money to support a lot of these new technologies and keep them going, or is it just a myth? Is it all going to go to the Googles and the Yahoos?
I mean, the Googles and the Yahoos are in large part supported by a lot of these small sites. I mean, Google makes a lot of its money through its syndication of its AdSense product. So there's two questions in that. One, are more ad dollars going to be spent online next year than this year? And I think maybe we're very myopically believing yes. It just seems like if you read ad studies, 30-some-odd% of awareness is being driven online, and still only 1 to 2% of ad budgets are being spent online. I think that's 6% now. So there's still a pretty big delta.
Well, where's it going to be spent? It's going to be spent at the NewYorkTimes.com, or
yeah, if you want to reach a certain person in that demographic, it will be. But if you want to reach 15-year-old boys, you're not going to find very many of them reading the New York Times. So I think a lot of it will flow through the Googles and the Yahoos, but still, there's a huge element of syndication. Of syndicated dollars that go on there, and a lot of the small website owners will still continue to do very, very well. The bigger you are, the more you'll be able to afford your own sales force and go off and sell ads directly. But it's not an insignificant investment for those small sites to do it. And so there will be a huge number of sites that live off of Google and Yahoo's syndicated products.
Yeah,
Well, I think the big difference, I mean, you hear that, and a lot of, in order to have an ad-supported model, you have to have a lot of users, right? Well, in order to get a lot of users, you have to build a platform, build a service that the users really want. I think with, the price compression of things like hardware, bandwidth, open source software, Photobucket, we're happy to say we're cash flow positive last year, and we have just a huge infrastructure costs. We have a lot of engineers writing a lot of code, but you keep it trimmed down and you don't go crazy. And I really do think that over time you're going to get better and better at monetizing. Every month we get better at it, and Google and Yahoo didn't just monetize the way they do day one. It's taken them time, tweaking, tuning to get to where they are. And I think that as long as you continue to grow your service, you're going to find more ways to monetize.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good question, because of the total ad market, 60% goes to search and 40% goes to other stuff, display advertising. And of that 40%, the vast majority goes to 3 or 4 of the biggest players. And then the rest is left. And the challenge is getting mind share with the people spending the money, right? So you're right, there's a ton of different new companies out there now. They're not all going to be able to get in to meet the head of the agency that's representing Ford or whoever it happens to be. I think personally there's going to be a lot of aggregation that happens, where you're going to have sort of combined network sales forces for a lot of these Web 2.0 companies, because just on sheer scale, you can't have 150 different sales reps coming in to pitch their company to a media buyer every single week. So there's something's going to have to change, because it doesn't support the scale right now.
The other thing is it's coming out of multiple budgets. It's coming out of radio and television as well as the interactive side. So not as much out of print, but it really is not a totally interactive phenomenon. It's a media phenomenon. I don't know. You're probably seeing the same.
Yep.
Yes.
For the small entrepreneurs in the audience, what would you guys recommend? I mean, is there a point for the sales force? I mean, at what ceiling did Break.com or Photobucket.com bring in their own internal, or are you guys doing that and putting on the AdSense, like overture players of the world to bring that in? How would you recommend, what recommendations do you have for small?
So we just recently, we kind of had the 1 billion impressions a month mark as a kind of a number the entire time that would be something we start doing some of the direct deals ourselves. I think that building out a sales team is extremely expensive. It's time consuming, and with the great, the great programs like Overture or AdSense, it lets the younger entrepreneur with younger businesses really get into a business much quicker. I know, 19-year-old kids that own MySpace layout sites making $250,000 a month in AdSense. Now that he's thrown a website up and he's got this huge audience. I think that those opportunities allow you to scale your business without building out an advertising, sales force day one. But you do get to a point in time where it does make sense once you have the volume.
Yeah, I think people, once people start coming to you and you need to field the inquiries is really when we did it. It's, it took care of itself for a long time, and then suddenly we were getting a lot of RFPs, and we didn't, A, really understand how to fill them out that well, and B, have, know how to maximize the value. And, at that stage it became very clear. But I would say we were at the millions of users a month before that happened, millions of users a month.
All right, well, we've run out of time. I want to thank the panelists for joining us today, and you all for joining us as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I do. Yes.